The pills rattled in the amber bottle like dice in a gambler's cup. I held them up to the afternoon light streaming through my kitchen window, watching the way the sun caught the edges of each white capsule. 30 days worth of medication that cost more than most people's monthly rent. The irony wasn't lost on me. After building a multi-million-dollar medical supply company from nothing, I was now dependent on these tiny lifelines to keep my heart beating steadily. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The cancer diagnosis had come 3 weeks ago, delivered by Dr. Harrison with the practiced gentleness of someone who'd broken this news countless times before. Stage 3 pancreatic cancer. 6 months to a year, maybe 18 if I was lucky, and responded well to treatment. The words had washed over me like cold water, leaving me surprisingly calm. At 72, I'd lived through my husband's death, the near collapse of my business during the recession, and the slow, painful realization that my only daughter saw me more as a burden than a mother. I set the pill bottle on the granite counter and walked to the window overlooking my backyard. The roses I'd planted when Richard was still alive bloomed in defiant bursts of red and pink, their thorns sharp enough to draw blood if you weren't careful. Like everything beautiful in life, they demanded respect. My phone buzzed against the counter. A text from Sandra, my daughter. "Mom, we need to talk. Can Donald and I come over tonight?" I stared at the message, feeling that familiar tightness in my chest that had nothing to do with my medical condition. Sandra and her husband Donald lived 20 minutes away, but visited maybe once a month, usually when they needed something. Their last visit had been to ask if I'd co-sign a loan for their new BMW. Before that, they'd wanted me to babysit their golden retriever while they went on a cruise to Alaska. "Of course, dear. I'll make dinner," I typed back, then immediately deleted it. Instead, I sent, "Yes, 6 o'clock. I'd learned the hard way that kindness was often mistaken for weakness, especially by family members who'd grown accustomed to taking without giving. The lesson had cost me dearly over the years. Richard's life insurance money that I'd loaned to Sandra for her master's degree and never seen again. The vacation home in Vermont that I'd let them use so often it became theirs in everything but name, until I finally signed it over to avoid the guilt trips. The doorbell rang precisely at 6. Through the peephole, I could see Sandra adjusting her designer handbag, the one I'd bought her for her birthday last year, while Donald checked his Rolex. They looked like a successful couple, which they were, thanks in large part to my generosity over the years. Sandra worked as a marketing director for a tech company, pulling in 6 figures. Donald was a financial advisor who managed wealthy clients' portfolios with the same calculating precision he brought to every family interaction. "Hi, Mom." Sandra's hug was brief, perfunctory. She was 45 now, with the kind of carefully maintained appearance that came from expensive salons and regular personal training sessions. Her dark hair was pulled back in a sleek chignon, not a strand out of place. "You look tired." "I'm fine," I lied, leading them to the living room. The space still reflected Richard's and my taste. Warm woods, comfortable fabrics, family photos that told the story of better times. Sandra and Donald perched on the edge of the couch like they were in a waiting room, not their family home. "Mom, we're worried about you," Sandra began, her voice taking on that patronizing tone she'd perfected over the years. "Living alone in this big house, managing all your finances, it's a lot for someone your age." "I'm 72, not 92, I replied, settling into my favorite armchair. "And I've been managing my finances since before you were born." Donald leaned forward, his expression serious. "We know, Annie, but with your health situation, maybe it's time to think about making some changes." My blood chilled. They knew about the cancer. I'd been so careful, going to appointments alone, using my maiden name at the oncology office to avoid any chance of them finding out through their insurance connections. But somehow, they'd discovered my secret. "What exactly are you suggesting?" I asked, my voice steady despite the racing of my heart. Sandra and Donald exchanged a look, the kind of silent communication that comes from planning a conversation in advance. "We think it would be best if you moved in with us," Sandra said. "Or maybe into one of those nice senior communities, somewhere with medical support on site." "And your house?" I asked. though I already knew the answer. "We could handle the sale for you," Donald offered, his tone suggesting he was doing me a tremendous favor. "The real estate market is strong right now. You'd get a good price, and we could help you invest the proceeds wisely." I studied their faces, seeing the carefully hidden eagerness beneath their expressions of concern. They'd probably already researched the property value, maybe even talked to a realtor. The house was worth close to $2 million in today's market. Waterfront property in Newport didn't depreciate. "What about my medication?" I asked quietly. Sandra's face softened slightly. "Mom, we know the cancer treatments are expensive, but if you're living with us, we can help manage your care. Maybe look into some more cost-effective options." Cost-effective. The phrase hung in the air like a death sentence. I thought about the pills in my kitchen, the chemotherapy appointments that gave me a fighting chance, the experimental treatment Dr. Harrison had mentioned that might extend my life by precious months. "I need to think about it," I said finally. "Of course," Donald said, standing. "But don't wait too long. Your health is the priority, and we want to make sure you're getting the best care possible." After they left, I sat in the growing darkness of my living room, not bothering to turn on the lights. The house felt different now, like a fortress under siege. I could see their plan clearly. Move me into their guest room, take control of my finances, and let me die quietly and affordably while they positioned themselves to inherit everything. The cruel irony was that they had no idea how much everything actually was. 3 months ago, just before my diagnosis, I'd finally accepted the buyout offer from MedTech Industries. 47 years of building Annie's medical supply from a small storefront operation into a regional powerhouse had culminated in an $8.2 million sale. After taxes and fees, I'd netted just over $6 million. Money that Sandra and Donald assumed didn't exist. I'd planned to tell them about the sale eventually, maybe set up trust funds for any future grandchildren, ensure Sandra's financial security. But their visit tonight had shown me exactly what my financial security would buy: a quick death and a quicker inheritance. The phone rang, startling me from my dark thoughts. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but something made me answer. "Annie?" The voice was warm, familiar, though I couldn't place it immediately. "It's Miguel Santos. I hope I'm not calling too late." Miguel Santos. The name brought back a flood of memories from 30 years ago. A young Portuguese immigrant who'd worked in my warehouse, charming and hard-working, with eyes that held secrets and dreams. We'd had a brief, intense affair after Richard's death, one that had ended when he'd moved back to Portugal to care for his aging mother. "Miguel," I breathed, sinking back into my chair. "How did you find me?" "I never stopped looking," he said softly. "I heard about your illness through mutual friends. I wanted to call sooner, but I wasn't sure if you'd want to hear from me. You know about the cancer?" "Elena, I know about everything. The diagnosis, your daughter's plans, the way they're circling like vultures. I also know about the money from the business sale." My blood turned to ice. "How could you possibly know about that?" "Because I never stopped caring about you, even after all these years. I have friends who keep me informed about the people I love. When I heard what was happening, I had to reach out." The line went quiet for a moment, both of us processing the weight of his words. Love. After 30 years, he'd said it so easily, like no time had passed at all. "Miguel, I don't understand what you're saying." "I'm saying that you have options, Annie. You don't have to let them steal your dignity along with your money. I'm saying that there are places in this world where $6 million can buy you not just comfort, but freedom. Real freedom." I closed my eyes, feeling something I hadn't experienced in years. Hope. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that you disappear, Elena. I'm suggesting that you let them think they've won, and then you vanish into a life they can never touch. I'm suggesting that you come to Portugal, where I can take care of you the way you deserve to be cared for." The proposal hung between us like a bridge across an impossible chasm. I thought about Sandra's cold calculation, Donald's eager greed, the way they'd already written me off as a burden to be managed rather than a person to be loved. "I can't just disappear," I said finally. "There are legal considerations, medical needs." "Leave that to me," Miguel said. I've spent 30 years building a life here, Elena. I have connections, resources, people who can help. All you have to do is say yes. Through the window, I could see the lights of my neighbors' houses, each one representing a life I'd never really been part of. Despite living here for 25 years, I'd remained an outsider, the widow who kept to herself, the mother whose daughter rarely visited. What was I really leaving behind? I need time to think, I said. Of course. But Elena, don't take too long. From what I understand, your daughter is moving quickly, and once they get control of your finances— He didn't need to finish the sentence. We both knew what would happen once Sandra and Donald got their hands on my money. The expensive treatments would become unnecessary. The medication would be deemed too costly, and I'd fade away in their spare bedroom while they enjoyed their windfall. I'll call you tomorrow, I promised. I'll be waiting, Miguel said. And Elena, whatever you decide, remember that you deserve better than what they're offering. You deserve to be loved, not managed. After he hung up, I sat in the darkness for a long time, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on me like a physical force. Outside, the ocean waves crashed against the rocks below my house, their rhythm as constant and reliable as my heartbeat. But hearts could be fooled, could be weakened by disease and disappointment. The pills on my kitchen counter represented one kind of future, a medicated decline under Sandra's watchful, calculating eye. But Miguel's voice had opened a door to something else entirely, a chance to choose my own ending, to write the final chapter of my story on my own terms. I thought about the beach house Miguel had described, the way the Atlantic looked from the cliffs of Algarve, the freedom that came with being unknown and unmanaged. I thought about Sandra's shocked face when she discovered that her inheritance had vanished along with her mother. The idea should have made me feel guilty. Instead, it made me feel powerful for the first time in years. I picked up my phone and began searching for flights to Lisbon. The flight to Lisbon left at 11:47 p.m. from Logan Airport. I stared at the booking page on my laptop screen, my finger hovering over the purchase button like it was a trigger. One click would set everything in motion. One click would transform me from Annie the dutiful mother into someone else entirely, someone who chose her own fate. I'd been sitting at my kitchen table for 3 hours, surrounded by the detritus of careful planning. Bank statements, medical records, legal documents, and a yellow legal pad covered in my handwriting. The numbers didn't lie. With proper management, my $6 million could last decades in Portugal, where the cost of living was a fraction of what it was in Newport. Even with private medical care, I could live like a queen. The house phone rang, jolting me from my calculations. Sandra's name appeared on the caller ID. "Hi, Mom. I hope I didn't wake you." "I'm up," I said, closing the laptop. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Donald and I were just talking about our conversation tonight, and we realized we might have seemed a bit pushy. We're just worried about you." The fake concern in her voice made my stomach turn. "I appreciate that, dear. We want you to know that whatever you decide, we're here for you." "But, Mom, I have to ask, are you having any financial difficulties? The treatments, the medication, it must be expensive." There it was, the real reason for the late-night call. They weren't worried about my health. They were worried about my bank account. How much was left? How quickly was it being depleted? How soon could they swoop in and take control? "I'm managing," I said carefully. "Because if you need help, we can look into some programs. There are ways to restructure your assets to qualify for assistance. Donald knows people who specialize in elder care planning." Elder care planning. The euphemism made my skin crawl. What Sandra was really suggesting was that I hide or transfer my assets to qualify for government assistance, letting taxpayers fund my care while my daughter inherited my wealth. "That's thoughtful of you, Sandra, but I'm not ready for that conversation yet." "I understand. But Mom, time isn't on our side here. These things take time to set up properly, and if you wait too long—" "If I wait too long, what? I'll die before you can steal my money?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. The silence that followed was deafening. "Mom, I can't believe you just said that. We're trying to help you." "No, you're trying to help yourselves. Do you think I'm stupid, Sandra? Do you think I don't see what you're doing?" What we're doing is trying to take care of our mother who's sick and alone and clearly not thinking straight. Not thinking straight. The phrase hung in the air like a slap. It was the beginning of the narrative they'd use to justify everything that came next. Poor Annie, not thinking straight. Poor Annie needs protection from her own bad decisions. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years, I said quietly. Good night, Sandra. I hung up before she could respond, my hands shaking with rage and something else. Liberation. For the first time in decades, I'd spoken the truth to my daughter's face. It felt terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. The laptop screen had gone dark. I opened it again and clicked purchase on the flight to Lisbon. The confirmation email arrived immediately. Seat 3A. Departing tomorrow night. No return ticket. My phone buzzed with a text from Miguel. Have you thought about what we discussed? I'm coming, I typed back. Flight arrives Thursday afternoon. The response came immediately. I'll be waiting. And Elena? You're making the right choice. I spent the rest of the night in a peculiar state of calm efficiency. I'd always been a planner, someone who thought 3 steps ahead. Now I was thinking 3 countries ahead, and the mental gymnastics required were strangely soothing. First, I called my attorney's emergency line. Robert Steinberg had been handling my legal affairs for 15 years, and I trusted him implicitly. He answered on the second ring, his voice thick with sleep. Annie, what's wrong? I need to execute some documents immediately. Tonight, if possible. What kind of documents? Power of attorney revocation, will changes, and I need to establish some offshore accounts. Can you meet me at your office in 2 hours? There was a pause. Annie, it's 1 a.m. Are you feeling all right? I'm feeling like myself for the first time in years. Are you available or not? I'll be there in 90 minutes. But Annie, whatever's happening, we should discuss it carefully. Major financial decisions when you're dealing with a health crisis. The health crisis is exactly why I need to do this now. I'll explain everything when I see you. Robert's law office occupied the top floor of a colonial-era building in downtown Newport. At 2:30 a.m., the streets were empty except for a few stragglers from the waterfront bars. I parked in the empty lot behind the building and made my way to the back entrance where Robert was waiting. He looked exactly like what he was, a 60-year-old attorney who'd been dragged out of bed by a client's emergency. His gray hair was disheveled, his shirt wrinkled, but his eyes were sharp and alert. All right, Annie, talk to me. I told him everything. The cancer diagnosis, Sandra and Donald's manipulation, Miguel's call, and my decision to disappear. Robert listened without interruption, his expression growing more concerned with each detail. You want to fake your own death? He asked when I finished. Not fake it. Just step away from this life and into another one. Legally. Annie, what you're describing is incredibly complex. The tax implications alone can be handled. That's why you have those contacts in the Cayman Islands, isn't it? The ones you've used for your other clients who needed privacy? Robert had the grace to look embarrassed. Those are legitimate business structures. And this is legitimate personal protection. My daughter is planning to have me declared incompetent so she can control my finances. I have documentation of her intentions, recordings of conversations. What I'm doing is protecting myself from financial abuse. And the money from the business sale? Already being transferred. I've set up accounts in 3 different countries, all perfectly legal. The money will be out of U.S. jurisdiction by the time Sandra realizes what's happening. What about your medical care? Portugal has excellent private hospitals. Miguel has connections with the best oncologists in Lisbon. I'll receive better care there than I would in my daughter's spare bedroom. Robert rubbed his temples. This is a lot to process. You're essentially disappearing and leaving behind everyone you know. I'm leaving behind people who see me as a resource to be managed, not a person to be loved. There's a difference. He studied me for a long moment. You're sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Then let's get started. We worked until dawn, drafting documents that would protect me from Sandra's machinations while giving me the freedom to disappear. The power of attorney I'd given her years earlier was revoked. My will was changed to leave everything to a series of charitable trusts. Most importantly, We established a complex web of legal structures that would make it impossible for anyone to locate or access my assets. The beauty of this setup, Robert explained as we finished, is that it's completely legal. You're not hiding money from the government. You're protecting it from potential financial abuse. And if anyone tries to challenge your competency, they'll find that you've made these decisions with full legal counsel and documentation. What about my disappearance? That's trickier. You can't just vanish. People will look for you. But you can redirect their attention. Make it seem like you've gone somewhere else for treatment. Somewhere that would explain why you're not in contact. How? Leave a trail. Make it obvious that you've gone to seek experimental treatment somewhere. Mexico, maybe, or one of those clinics in Switzerland. Create a narrative that explains your absence while sending them looking in the wrong direction. As the sun rose over Newport Harbor, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Excitement about the future. Not the resigned acceptance of decline, but genuine anticipation for what came next. I drove home through the quiet streets, past the mansions of people who'd inherited their wealth and the businesses of people who'd built their own. In 12 hours, I'd be on a plane to a new life, leaving behind the daughter who'd already written me off as dead. The house felt different as I walked through it one last time. It had been a home when Richard was alive, a sanctuary during the early years of widowhood, but somewhere along the way it had become a prison. Every room held memories of disappointment, of Sandra's increasingly rare visits, of holidays spent alone while my daughter found excuses to be elsewhere. I packed one suitcase with essentials, leaving everything else exactly as it was. Sandra would find a house that looked like her mother had simply stepped out for groceries. It would drive her crazy, that lack of closure, that absence of explanation. My phone rang as I was closing the suitcase. Sandra again. "Mom, I'm coming over. We need to talk about last night." "That's not necessary, dear. I'm feeling much better today." "I'm glad to hear that, but I think we got off on the wrong foot. Maybe we can start over, approach this differently." "Of course. Why don't we have lunch next week? I'll call you." "Next week? Mom, this can't wait. My health is my responsibility, Sandra. I'll call you next week." I hung up and turned off the phone, removing the battery for good measure. Let her wonder. Let her worry. Let her realize, finally, that she'd underestimated her mother's intelligence and overestimated her own power. The taxi arrived at 6 p.m. As we pulled away from the house, I didn't look back. Some chapters ended not with dramatic flourishes, but with the quiet click of a door closing. This was my quiet click, the sound of a woman choosing her own ending. The Atlantic stretched endlessly beneath the plane's wing, a dark mirror reflecting my thoughts as I flew toward my new life. In seat 3A, I sipped wine and watched America disappear behind me, feeling lighter with each mile. The other passengers slept or read, oblivious to the fact that they were sharing their cabin with a ghost, someone who had chosen to die to one world in order to live in another. My phone, powered on for the last time before I'd board, had buzzed incessantly with calls from Sandra. 17 missed calls, each one more desperate than the last. I'd listened to the voicemails during my layover in Boston, her voice evolving from annoyed to worried to panicked. "Mom, where are you? I went to the house and you weren't there. Your car is gone. Please call me back." "Mom, this isn't funny. Donald and I are worried sick. If you're trying to make a point about last night, you've made it. Please just call me." "Mom, I'm calling the police if I don't hear from you in the next hour. This is insane. Where could you possibly have gone?" The final message, left just before boarding, had been different. Sandra's voice was cold, calculating. "I know you're playing games, Mom. Whatever you think you're accomplishing, this won't work. You can't just disappear. You have responsibilities, obligations. And frankly, making these kinds of irrational decisions just proves what Donald and I have been saying about your mental state." Mental state. There it was again, the weapon they'd use to justify everything that came next. Poor Annie, not thinking clearly. Poor Annie needs protection from herself. I deleted the messages and powered off the phone permanently, dropping it into a trash bin at Logan Airport. That device, with its history of calls and texts and location data, belonged to the woman I used to be. The plane touched down in Lisbon at 2:47 p.m. local time. Portuguese customs was perfunctory, a polite stamp in my passport, a brief glance at my single suitcase. I was just another American tourist, unremarkable and forgettable. Perfect. Miguel was waiting in the arrivals hall, and 30 years collapsed into nothing the moment I saw him. His hair was silver now, his face lined with age and experience, but his eyes were exactly as I remembered, warm, intelligent, and full of secrets. He wore a simple white shirt and dark pants, and somehow managed to look more elegant than Donald in his $1,000 suits. "Elena," he said, my name sounding musical in his accented English. "You came." "I came," I confirmed, and then I was in his arms, breathing in the scent of his cologne and the salt air of his homeland. It felt like coming home to a place I'd never been. "How do you feel?" he asked, studying my face with the kind of attention Sandra hadn't shown me in years. "Free," I said, and meant it. He led me to a black Mercedes parked in the pickup zone, handling my suitcase with the casual authority of someone accustomed to taking care of things. As we drove through Lisbon's narrow streets, he filled me in on the arrangements he'd made. "I have a house in Cascais, on the coast. It's private, beautiful, with a garden that overlooks the ocean. You'll love it. I've also arranged for you to meet with Dr. Carvalho next week. He's one of the best oncologists in Europe. He's familiar with your case." "How could he be familiar with my case?" Miguel smiled. "I may have taken some liberties with your medical records. Dr. Harrison was very helpful once I explained that you were seeking a second opinion for private treatment abroad. You contacted my doctor. I contacted your doctor as your concerned friend who was helping arrange international care. He was actually quite supportive of the idea. Apparently, he's not impressed with your daughter's attitude toward your treatment." I stared at him. "You've thought of everything." "I've had 30 years to think about what I'd do if I ever got a second chance with you. I wasn't going to let the details trip me up." We drove in comfortable silence for a while, the Portuguese countryside rolling past the windows. Olive groves, vineyards, small villages with red tile roofs. It was like a postcard, but real, tangible, mine. "Miguel," I said finally, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Always. Are you doing this because you feel sorry for me? Because you see me as some pathetic old woman who needs rescuing?" He was quiet for so long that I thought he wasn't going to answer. Then he pulled the car over to the side of the road and turned to face me. "Elena, when I left America 30 years ago, I thought I was doing the right thing. My mother was dying. My family needed me. And you were grieving Richard, trying to rebuild your life. I thought I would just be another complication. You were never a complication. I know that now. But then, I was young and stupid, and thought I was being noble. I spent the next 3 decades building a life here, becoming successful, making money, but always feeling like something was missing. When I heard about your diagnosis, about what your daughter was planning, I realized this was my chance to fix the mistake I made 30 years ago. What mistake? Leaving you. Letting you think that what we had was just a, what do you call it? A rebound? It wasn't. It was real, and I was too much of a coward to fight for it. He reached over and took my hand. "I'm not rescuing you, Elena. I'm asking you to rescue me. I'm asking you to let me spend whatever time we have left loving you the way I should have loved you 30 years ago." The words hit me like a physical blow. When was the last time someone had spoken to me about love instead of obligations? When was the last time someone had asked for my companionship instead of my compliance? "Miguel, I'm dying." "We're all dying, querida. The question is whether we're living first." We drove the rest of the way to Cascais in a different kind of silence, one charged with possibility instead of resignation. The house was everything he'd promised. A white villa perched on a cliff overlooking the Atlantic, with gardens that cascaded down toward the sea. It was large enough to feel spacious, but small enough to feel intimate, decorated with a mixture of Portuguese antiques and modern comfort. "This is yours," Miguel said as we stood on the terrace, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. "I bought it 3 years ago, but I always thought of it as ours. I was just waiting for you to come home. Home. The word felt strange and wonderful on my tongue. When had I last felt at home anywhere? That evening, as we sat on the terrace with wine and cheese, my American phone, the one I'd thought was dead, buzzed with an international call. The Portuguese phone Miguel had given me. Sandra had somehow gotten the number. "Don't answer it," Miguel said quietly. "I have to. Just this once. I need to hear what she's saying." I picked up the call, putting it on speaker so Miguel could hear. "Mom? Mom, is that you? Where the hell are you?" "Hello, Sandra. Don't you— Hello, Sandra, me. Do you have any idea what you've put us through? We've been calling hospitals, police stations, morgues. We thought you were dead." "I'm sorry you were worried." "Worried? We were terrified. And then we find out you've been making all these financial changes, moving money around, revoking powers of attorney. What the hell is going on?" So she'd discovered the legal maneuvering. Good. Let her see how it felt to be outmaneuvered. I'm taking control of my own life, Sandra. Something I should have done years ago. By running away? By disappearing without a word? Mom, this is not taking control. This is having a breakdown. I'm in Portugal, Sandra. I'm seeking treatment here. Portugal? What kind of treatment? The kind that gives me hope instead of making me a burden on my family. There was a pause. Mom, you're not a burden. We were trying to help you. No, you were trying to help yourselves. There's a difference. That's not fair. We love you. You love my money. You love the idea of inheriting my house. You love the convenience of having me out of the way. But you don't love me, Sandra. You haven't loved me for years. Mom, you're being ridiculous. Come home. We can work this out. I am home, I said, looking out at the ocean that stretched endlessly toward the horizon. For the first time in years, I'm actually home. What about your treatment? Your doctors? Your medication? All arranged. I'm in good hands. Whose hands? Who's helping you with this insane plan? I looked at Miguel, who was watching me with an expression of fierce pride. A friend. Someone who actually cares about my well-being. Mom, listen to me. You're not thinking clearly. The cancer, the medication, it's affecting your judgment. Come home and let us take care of you. Goodbye, Sandra. Mom, don't hang up. Mom? Mom. I ended the call and turned off the phone, setting it on the table between Miguel and me. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the sound of waves crashing against the rocks below. How do you feel? Miguel asked. Like I just cut the last chain binding me to a life I never wanted. Any regrets? I thought about it honestly. Sandra was my daughter, my only child. We'd had good times once when she was young, and before money and inheritance had poisoned our relationship. But the woman who'd called me tonight wasn't the daughter I'd raised. She was a stranger wearing my daughter's face, speaking in a language of manipulation and control. None, I said finally. Let her think I'm having a breakdown. Let her think I'm not capable of making rational decisions. She'll discover soon enough that I'm more rational than she's ever been. Miguel raised his wine glass. To new beginnings. To choosing our own endings, I corrected. And we drank to the sunset and the sound of the sea and the strange, wonderful feeling of being exactly where I belonged. 3 weeks into my Portuguese resurrection, I woke each morning to the sound of seabirds and the scent of salt air, feeling more alive than I had in years. The cancer was still there, a dark passenger I carried with me everywhere, but Dr. Carvalho's treatments were aggressive and hopeful. More importantly, I had a reason to fight that had nothing to do with obligation and everything to do with choice. Miguel and I had fallen into a rhythm that felt both new and ancient. He brought me coffee in bed each morning, Portuguese newspapers that I was slowly learning to read, and stories about the life he'd built here. He owned a small chain of boutique hotels along the coast, places that catered to discerning travelers who valued privacy and elegance. His success had been built on the same principles that had made my medical supply business thrive: attention to detail, genuine care for people's needs, and the intelligence to see opportunities others missed. "You could help me," he said one morning as we walked along the beach below the house. The exercise was part of my treatment regimen, but it felt more like joy than medicine. I've been thinking about expanding into medical tourism. Wealthy Americans who want first-class treatment away from the bureaucracy of U.S. healthcare. You mean people like me? People exactly like you. Americans with money who've been failed by a system that sees them as profit centers rather than human beings. I considered the idea. It had merit. Portugal's healthcare system was excellent, the cost of living was low, and the quality of life was extraordinary. Americans facing devastating medical bills or family members who saw them as burdens could find sanctuary here, just as I had. It would need to be done carefully, I said. The legal structures, the medical partnerships, the logistics of helping people disappear from lives that no longer serve them. You sound interested. I sound like someone who's found her purpose again. We were interrupted by the buzzing of my Portuguese phone. Dr. Carvalho's office, calling with test results. I answered in the Portuguese I was rapidly acquiring, proud of my ability to navigate the conversation without Miguel's help. The news was better than I dared hope. The aggressive treatment was working. The tumors were shrinking. I had months, possibly years, certainly time enough to build something meaningful. Boa noticia? Miguel asked when I hung up. Very good news, I confirmed, and kissed him with the passion of someone who'd been given an unexpected gift. That afternoon, as I sat on the terrace answering emails on my laptop, my old American phone rang. I'd kept it active for one reason. I wanted to know when Sandra discovered the full extent of my disappearance. The caller ID showed Robert Steinberg's number. Annie, where the hell are you? Portugal. Didn't Sandra tell you? Sandra told me you'd lost your mind and run off to have some kind of breakdown. She's filing papers to have you declared mentally incompetent. I felt a cold smile spread across my face. On what grounds? She says you've made irrational financial decisions, disappeared without notice, and are refusing medical treatment. She's got affidavits from doctors saying that cancer can affect cognitive function, and she's arguing that your recent behavior proves you're not capable of managing your affairs. Interesting theory. What does the judge think? The judge wants to hear from you directly. Sandra's petition requires proof that you're actually incompetent, not just making decisions she doesn't like. If you can demonstrate that you're thinking clearly and acting in your own best interests, which I am, then her petition fails. But Annie, you need to be careful. If she can convince a court that you're not competent, she can void all the legal structures we put in place. She could gain control of your assets, force you to return to the U.S. for treatment. Let her try. This isn't a game. She's hired serious lawyers. They're going to argue that your decision to move to Portugal, transfer your money offshore, and cut contact with your family is evidence of diminished capacity. And I'll argue that my decision to protect myself from financial abuse and seek better medical treatment is evidence of enhanced capacity. Robert, I'm not some confused old woman. I'm a businesswoman who built a multi-million-dollar company from nothing. I think I can handle my own daughter. There was a pause. You're different, Annie. You sound harder. I sound like someone who's stopped pretending that being manipulated is the same thing as being loved. What do you want me to do about Sandra's petition? Fight it! And Robert, I want you to file a counter-petition. I want Sandra and Donald investigated for attempted financial elder abuse. I have recordings of our conversations, documentation of their plans. I want them to understand that actions have consequences. Annie, that's a serious accusation. Are you sure you want to escalate this? I'm sure I want my daughter to learn that underestimating her mother was the biggest mistake of her life. After I hung up, I sat in the Portuguese sunshine, feeling the weight of what I'd just set in motion. Sandra thought she could use the legal system to force me back into compliance. She was about to learn that her mother knew how to use that same system far more effectively. Miguel found me there an hour later, staring out at the ocean with the expression he couldn't read. Bad news? He asked. Sandra's trying to have me declared mentally incompetent so she can control my money. Can she do that? She can try. But she's forgotten something important. What's that? I'm not the helpless old woman she thinks I am. I'm the woman who built a business empire while she was playing dress-up. I'm the woman who outmaneuvered her at every turn without her even realizing it. And now I'm the woman who's going to teach her the most expensive lesson of her life. Miguel sat down beside me. What are you planning? Justice, I said simply. Sandra wants to paint me as a confused old woman who can't handle her own affairs? I'm going to show her exactly how capable I am. That evening, I made a series of calls that would have impressed my former business associates. First, to a private investigator in Boston who specialized in financial fraud. Sandra and Donald's attempt to manipulate me into signing over my assets constituted a textbook case of elder abuse. I wanted every conversation documented, every manipulative text message analyzed, every meeting with lawyers and financial planners cataloged. Second, to a forensic accountant who could trace exactly how Sandra and Donald had spent the money I'd given them over the years. The loan for her master's degree that was never repaid. The vacation home in Vermont that had somehow become theirs without compensation. The countless smaller gifts and subsidies that had funded their lifestyle while I lived modestly and saved carefully. Third, to a publicity firm that specialized in high-profile legal cases. If Sandra wanted to make this public by filing court documents, I'd give her more publicity than she'd bargained for. The story of a successful businesswoman protecting herself from her greedy daughter would play very well in the media. "You're declaring war," Miguel observed as I finished the last call. "I'm ending one," I corrected. Sandra declared war on me the moment she decided I was more valuable dead than alive. I'm just finally fighting back. The next morning brought an email that made me laugh out loud. Sandra had hired a private investigator to find me in Portugal. The man had actually called Miguel's hotel, posing as a journalist writing about American expatriates, asking if he knew anything about an elderly American woman who might be seeking medical treatment in the area. Miguel had been delighted to help, providing the investigator with detailed information about an American woman in her 70s who was indeed receiving cancer treatment. The woman, he'd explained, was staying at a private clinic in the mountains near Porto, very exclusive, very discreet. The investigator had been so grateful for the lead that he'd actually tipped Miguel for the information. "She's chasing shadows," Miguel said as he showed me the email from his hotel manager, reporting the strange inquiry. "While she's looking for a sick old woman hiding in mountain clinics, you're right here in plain sight, getting stronger every day." "It's perfect," I agreed. "Let her waste her money and her time. Every day she spends searching for me is another day I'm building my case against her." My phone rang. Robert again. "Annie, I've got news. Sandra's investigator found something in Portugal." "Did he now?" "He's located a clinic where he thinks you're being treated. Sandra's flying to Portugal tomorrow to bring you home." I felt a surge of pure satisfaction. How interesting. Where exactly does she think I am? Some place called the Serra da Estrela Medical Center. Apparently it specializes in alternative cancer treatments for wealthy international patients. I looked at Miguel, who was grinning. The Serra da Estrela Medical Center was indeed a real place, and they did treat international patients. What Sandra's investigator hadn't discovered was that it was also a psychiatric facility, specializing in patients with dementia and other cognitive disorders. "Robert," I said carefully, "when Sandra arrives at that clinic, she's going to find that her information was inaccurate." "What do you mean?" "I mean she's going to look like a crazy woman demanding to see a patient who was never there, making wild accusations about kidnapping and financial fraud. The clinic's security team is very professional, and they don't tolerate disruptions to their patients' care." "Annie, what have you done?" "I've given my daughter exactly what she's been asking for. A chance to demonstrate her mental state under pressure. I wonder how rational she'll seem when the Portuguese police are called to remove her from a psychiatric facility." The silence on the other end of the line was profound. "You've planned this," Robert said finally. "I've planned everything, Robert. From the moment Sandra showed her true colors, I've been 3 steps ahead of her. And tomorrow, when she discovers that her mother isn't the helpless victim she thought she was, she's going to learn what it feels like to be outmaneuvered by someone who's supposedly not thinking clearly. And if she keeps fighting, then she'll discover that this was just the opening move. I have months of evidence, thousands of documents, and the resources to fight her in every court in America. But more importantly, I have something she'll never have." "What's that?" "The moral high ground. I'm not trying to steal from her, Robert. I'm just refusing to be stolen from. There's a difference, and any judge worth their salt will see it." As I hung up, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. The thrill of a well-executed strategy coming together. Sandra had underestimated her opponent, and now she was about to pay the price for that mistake. Sandra's arrival in Portugal was everything I'd hoped for and more. Miguel's contacts at the Serra da Estrela Medical Center had been delighted to cooperate once he'd explained the situation. The clinic's director, Dr. Fonseca, had dealt with difficult family members before, wealthy relatives who tried to manipulate medical facilities to serve their own agendas. I watched from the comfort of my terrace as the events unfolded, receiving updates via text from Miguel's friend who worked as a liaison at the clinic. Sandra had arrived with Donald and a Portuguese lawyer she'd hired, demanding to see me and threatening legal action when told I wasn't a patient there. "American woman becoming very aggressive," came the first text. "Security called. She is claiming patient records have been falsified. Now she is demanding to search entire facility," came the second. "Director explaining this is impossible. Lawyer looking embarrassed." The third text made me smile. Police arrived. Woman screaming about international kidnapping. Husband trying to calm her down. This is better than television. Miguel returned home that evening with a bottle of champagne and a satisfied expression. "Your daughter," he said, pouring 2 glasses, "has had quite an educational day. Tell me everything." According to Dr. Fonseca, she arrived convinced that you were being held against your will, possibly drugged and unable to make rational decisions. When they explained that you'd never been a patient there, she accused them of lying, of being paid to hide you. And then she tried to force her way into the psychiatric wing, claiming she had the right to search for her kidnapped mother. That's when security intervened. I sipped my champagne, savoring both the bubbles and the mental image of Sandra's frustrated rage. Was she arrested? No, but she was escorted off the property with a formal trespass warning. The Portuguese police took statements, and her behavior is now documented in an official report. Dr. Fonseca was particularly impressed by her claims that you'd been brainwashed by an international conspiracy of doctors and lawyers. Poor Sandra. She must be so confused. She's staying at a hotel in Porto tonight. According to my sources, she spent the afternoon calling every private clinic in northern Portugal, demanding to know if they were treating an American woman named Annie. And finding nothing, I assume. Nothing except growing irritation from medical professionals who don't appreciate being accused of fraud and kidnapping. That night, as I lay in Miguel's arms listening to the ocean, I felt a profound sense of completion. Not the completion that comes from endings, but the kind that comes from perfect symmetry. Sandra had tried to use my illness to control me, so I'd used her greed to expose her. She'd tried to paint me as mentally incompetent, so I'd documented her own irrational behavior. She'd tried to steal my money, so I'd ensured she'd spend a fortune trying to find what was never lost. My phone rang at 7 a.m. the next morning. Sandra, calling from Portugal. "Mom, I know you're here somewhere. I've been to every clinic, every hospital. Where are you hiding?" "I'm not hiding, Sandra. I'm living." "Living where?" "I've been searching for 3 days. The investigator said you were at that clinic, but they claim they've never heard of you. Perhaps your investigator made a mistake. Perhaps he told you what you wanted to hear rather than the truth." "Mom, this is insane. Just tell me where you are. Let me see you. Let me talk to you face to face." "Why? So you can have me dragged back to America? So you can lock me in your spare room while you sell my house and spend my money? That's not... We never said we were going to sell your house." "You didn't have to say it, Sandra. I've seen the real estate listings Donald printed out. I've heard the conversations you thought I couldn't hear. I know exactly what you plan to do with your helpless, incompetent mother." The silence stretched between us across the Atlantic. "Mom, where did we go wrong? When did you start hating us so much?" The question caught me off guard. In all the planning and maneuvering, I'd focused on Sandra's greed and manipulation, not on the deeper question of how we'd reached this point. "I don't hate you, Sandra. I'm just tired of being treated like a problem to be solved rather than a person to be loved. We do love you. No, you love the idea of me. You love the convenience of having a mother who doesn't make demands, who doesn't have needs of her own, who exists only to serve your financial interests. But you don't love me, the real me, with opinions and desires and the intelligence to see through your manipulations. That's not fair, isn't it? When was the last time you asked how I was feeling? Not about my cancer, but about my life. When was the last time you visited me just to spend time together, not because you needed something? When was the last time you treated me like your mother instead of your inheritance? Another silence. I want to see you, Sandra said finally. I want to talk to you in person, not through lawyers and accusations. Then you should have done that years ago when it might have mattered. It matters now. I'm your daughter. You're my daughter when it serves your purposes. The rest of the time, I'm just an inconvenience. Mom, please, tell me where you are. Let me come to you. I looked out at the ocean, at the life I'd built in these few short weeks. Miguel was in the garden, tending to the roses he'd planted in my honor. Dr. Carvalho had called yesterday with more good news. The treatment was exceeding all expectations. I had time, possibly years, to build something meaningful. Sandra, I'm going to tell you exactly where I am. Not because you deserve to know, but because I want you to understand what you lost when you chose greed over love. I gave her the address, watching through the window as Miguel looked up from his gardening, sensing something significant was happening. I'll be there in 2 hours, Sandra said. Take your time. I'm not going anywhere. Miguel found me on the terrace, staring at the phone. She's coming here? She's coming here. Are you sure that's wise? Probably not. But it's necessary. This ends today, one way or another. 2 hours later, a taxi pulled into our driveway. Sandra emerged first, looking haggard and older than her 45 years. Donald followed, his usual confidence replaced by uncertainty. They stood at the garden gate, taking in the beauty of the house, the gardens, the obvious prosperity and peace of the setting. I met them at the front door, and the shock on Sandra's face was almost worth the months of manipulation I'd endured. Mom, you look incredible. I did look incredible. The Portuguese sun had given me color, the good medical care had stabilized my condition, and most importantly, the freedom from their toxic expectations had restored something essential to my spirit. Thank you. Please, come in. I led them to the living room, where Miguel was waiting with tea and pastries. He stood when we entered, extending his hand to Sandra with perfect Portuguese courtesy. You must be Sandra. I'm Miguel Santos. Your mother has told me so much about you. Sandra shook his hand mechanically, her eyes darting around the room, taking in the expensive furnishings, the original artwork, the obvious signs of a life lived well. This is your house? She asked. Our house, Miguel corrected gently. Annie and I are building a life together. Donald's financial advisor instincts kicked in. This must have cost a fortune. Less than you might think, I said, settling into my favorite chair. Portugal is remarkably affordable for people who aren't trying to maintain an American lifestyle on someone else's money. Mom, Sandra began, but I held up a hand. Let me save us all some time. You came here to drag me back to America, to have me declared incompetent, to gain control of my finances so you could manage my decline in a way that serves your interests. Is that accurate? We came here because we were worried about you. No, you came here because you discovered that I'm smarter than you gave me credit for. You came here because your plan to steal my money legally has fallen apart. You came here because you're finally realizing that your mother isn't the helpless victim you thought she was. Sandra's composure cracked. We weren't trying to steal anything. We were trying to help you. By cutting off my medication, by moving me into your spare room, by selling my house and investing the proceeds through Donald's firm. That kind of help? You don't understand the complexities? I understand perfectly. I understand that you saw my cancer diagnosis as an opportunity. I understand that you calculated how much money you could save by letting me die cheaply and quickly. I understand that you never once asked what I wanted for my remaining time. Donald finally spoke. Annie, you're being unreasonable. We had legitimate concerns about your ability to manage your affairs. Did you? Then explain to me how a woman who built an $8 million business from nothing suddenly became too incompetent to manage her own money. Explain to me how deciding to seek better medical care in a country with excellent health care constitutes mental illness. 8 million? Sandra's voice was barely a whisper. Oh, didn't I mention that? Yes, I sold the business 3 months ago. For $8.2 million to be exact. The money you were so eager to manage? It's considerably more than you imagined. The color drained from Sandra's face. Where is it now? Safe, protected, in accounts you can never access, managed by people who actually have my best interests at heart. I stood up, moving to the window where I could see the ocean. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to return to America and withdraw your petition to have me declared incompetent. You're going to stop hiring investigators and lawyers and private detectives. You're going to leave me alone to live the rest of my life as I choose. And if we don't? Donald asked. Then you'll discover that I've spent the last month building a very comprehensive case for elder abuse, financial manipulation, emotional coercion, attempting to deny medical care to a cancer patient. The charges will be quite serious. The media attention will be significant. Miguel stepped forward. Your mother has also asked me to inform you that your inheritance has been revised. The house in Newport, the remaining assets, they're all going to charity now. Organizations that help protect elderly people from family members who see them as resources rather than human beings. Sandra started crying. Not the gentle tears of grief, but the harsh sobs of someone whose carefully laid plans had collapsed around them. Mom, you can't do this to us. We're your family. No, I said quietly, turning back to face them. Family is Miguel, who dropped everything to help me when I needed it most. Family is Dr. Carvalho, who treats my cancer without calculating how much money he can extract from my fear. Family is the people who love me enough to want me to be happy, not just compliant. You're our mother. I was your mother. Now I'm just a woman who refuses to be your victim any longer. I walked to the front door and opened it. Your taxi is waiting. Sandra and Donald filed past me in stunned silence. At the threshold, Sandra turned back one last time. I love you, Mom. Perhaps you do, in your way. But love without respect is just another form of control. And I'm done being controlled. I closed the door and returned to the living room, where Miguel was waiting with open arms. How do you feel? He asked. Free, I said. And for the first time in years, I meant it completely. 6 months later, I received news that Sandra and Donald were divorcing. The financial strain of their failed legal campaign, combined with the loss of their expected inheritance, had apparently destroyed their marriage. I felt a moment of sadness for the life Sandra might have lived if she'd chosen love over greed. But only a moment. I was too busy building my new life to mourn the ashes of the old one. My cancer was in remission, and Dr. Carvalho spoke optimistically about years, not months. Most importantly, I woke up each morning next to someone who loved me for who I was, not what I could provide. I fell asleep each night listening to the ocean, knowing that I had chosen my own ending after all. Some stories end with forgiveness, mine ended with justice, and sometimes that's enough.